Hey, welcome back to the Group Project Podcast. This is episode number 60, and I have none other than the Dr. Todd Rose. Now, if you've heard that name before, it's probably because you've seen his books before. For us educational leaders, there's a couple books that he's written that have been bestsellers. The most recent one was Dark Horse, which I've just finished it up a couple weeks ago. Loved it. Before that, he wrote The End of Average. And Todd and I have been talking a little bit before the show, and just a fascinating past that has led him to being the author, creating these these I guess you could say companies here, and then his work in the Harvard School of Education, which we're going to talk about as well. So, Dr. Rose, can I call you Todd? Is that okay?
Please.
Okay.
Please.
Well, I am excited. I mean, everything that you talk about in your books and some of your interviews is just fascinating. So I'm excited just to if you don't mind, just you've got such a cool backstory on where you were at, some of the trials in life, and where you're at now. Could you just take a few minutes to share that educational history growing up and what you're currently doing?
Sure. So yeah, I would have never imagined that most of my professional life would somehow involve education, because it didn't start off quite that great. I grew up in rural Utah, and for whatever reason, it wasn't a terribly good fit between who I was as an individual learner and my learning environment. And so, as you know, like, you start doing poorly and it kind of snowballs. You do poorly in algebra 1, kind of hard to do well in algebra 2, that kind of thing. So it culminated with I like to say I dropped out of high school, but the truth was it was a little more like, listen, you have a 0.9 GPA in my senior year, and they're like, you can't be here anymore. So but I like to say it was a mutual decision. It makes me feel like I had more control over it. But so I dropped out. I dropped out literally with a 0.9, which is just, you have to like work really hard to do that poorly. But and not that long after, my girlfriend found out she was pregnant. Now, I will say she's still my wife today. So
Okay.
26 years later or whatever. So that's good. So that was a good mistake. but so ended up on welfare. We had 2 kids. I was working a string of minimum wage jobs. It was just really like rock bottom. And to short version is I ended up deciding to get a GED and tried college at night while I worked. And through a series of, learning about who I was and what it took for me to do well, I ended up doing pretty well. And we could dig into some of that if you want, but graduated top of my class in psychology pre-med, went to Harvard for my doctorate, and then did a postdoc at the Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, went back to Harvard, became a professor for a decade, and then just recently left Harvard to run my own think tank called Populace.
Wow. Okay. So, I mean, when you just jumping from, you were at Weber State, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And did you get
thanks for pronouncing that correctly. That was
Weber? Well,
yes, perfect.
It is NCAA tournament time. And I feel like Weber State were they in it this year?
No, but listen, I love that you brought this up.
Okay.
So when I was applying to graduate school, because Weber State, it's like, but we got the Gonzaga effect, which was at the time, we were playing, we upset North Carolina, which was one of the biggest upsets ever up to that point. And so I'm interviewing like for graduate schools, and suddenly everyone's like, Weber State, yes. And then people who had friends that went to North Carolina, like, can I get a sweater or something? And so it was great.
Well, the only reason I knew Weber State was definitely from NCAA basketball. It might have been from the North Carolina upset.
Yeah, we get in every once in a while, but it's a great little school.
I thought so. So, but that's just okay. So, how did you go? There was a big jump there from, they kicked me out of high school to, I'm enrolling in the Harvard, doctoral program. There's a big gap there. Maybe fill in that gap for me a little bit.
So
How did that happen?
yeah, well, first it was out of just like something has to change, right? You can't. You have two kids, and it's a big difference when you have to take, like, their lives depend on you getting your act together, right? And but this will sound simple, but the big change was when I realized that it is all about fit. It is everything. Like, I was interpreting my poor fit as something about me as a learner. I just thought I was stupid, frankly. Um, and I realized pretty quickly that it's all about getting the fit between you as an individual and your environment, and that, like, even in fairly standardized environments, you have more control than you realize. So, I did a lot of weird things. Like, when I first enrolled, it was like basically my in-laws and everyone scraped together the $800 that it would take to do this first term, and it was like, okay, listen, no one could quite figure out. I was like, it didn't work before. Why would it work now?
Yeah.
But I was like, I got to do something. And
Yeah.
and so my advisor was like, well, you failed algebra 3 times. You should probably take remedial math and take remedial English. And I was like, my dad told me, listen, I don't know. He's like, I feel like remedial math is the most taken and failed class in college in the entire country. Like, you need to develop study habits. So why don't you pick classes that are like crazy interesting to you
Hmm.
till you build up that skill? And so I started picking classes, and they were all over the place. And the advisor was like, no kidding, literally made me sign something, being like, I get what I'm not listening, but and there was this moment. If I don't mean to like dominate, so you
No,
cut me off if this is too
no,
long, but like,
this is no, go for it.
so
This is
here's the
fascinating.
defining moment for me
Yes.
academically. And so I'm sitting in my second year. I'm sitting in a really big history class, like one of those big auditoriums. It was so boring. And I'm sitting next to a buddy of mine, a guy named Steve. And I said, oh, Steve, this is just awful. And we're getting done. And he goes, oh, no, 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 you don't have any idea. It is nothing compared to what I got myself into in the honors program. And I was like, oh, and I thought honors would be like the same kind of work, only like more.
Uh-huh.
And he said, no, 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 no. There aren't even, like, we don't lecture, we just debate. And he's like, it's small classes, so you can't really hide. You have to show up. And he's like, I don't even think there are right answers. Like, there's no tests. And I was like, this sounds amazing. Like, amazing. I'm like, I didn't realize that that was even a thing. So I like got out of this class and just like walked all the way up. The honors program was in the library at the top of the hill, had its own floor, walked right up there. And I went in to the office. I'd love to see the honors director. I want to be in the honors program. And so they said, okay, well, hold on, let me see if we can get him. And about 15 minutes later, he brings me in, and he said, okay, so you want to be in the honors program? He's like, we're really proud of what we have here. And he said, so you're just barely starting out. How did you do on, we took the ACTs, how'd you
Yeah.
do on the ACTs? And I was like, oh, well, I told him, and he's like, well, that's not very good, right? He's like, but it's okay. Not everyone does so well on standardized tests. And he's like, what was your high school GPA? And I told him, this is no kidding. I said, 0.9. And his honest to goodness response was, what 0.9? like I left something off. And so anyway, he was like, listen, you can't be in the honors program. And I saw it dawned on me, like, what am I doing? How did I just I'm embarrassing myself. So I thanked him, and I got up, and I started walking out. And as I walked out, his secretary, a woman named Marilyn Diamond,
Uh-huh.
her desk was right next to the door. And I walked out, and she reached out and she grabbed my arm, and she said, listen, I overheard the conversation. She said, if you want this, don't take no for an answer. And I was like, wait, I didn't know you could do that, right? So she tells me, she says, sit down on the couch and show him you're serious. So I sat on the couch. He comes out and he goes, what are you doing? I said, well, I want to be in the honors program. And he said, you can't. He went and taught a class and came back, and I was still there. It felt like the
Wow.
entire day, but and so anyway, so finally he says, okay, look, come here. He's like, explain to me why you want to do this, because I don't get it. And I explained to him, I said, listen, I think I know more about myself now, and I know the environments
Uh-huh.
that work and that don't. And he said, okay, look, I can't let you in formally right now, but what I'll do is I'll let you in provisionally, and you can choose one class. And if you do well, I'll let you take another one, and we'll go from there. So I picked this class called Plagues of the Modern Era, which a little timely now, but like
Yeah,
it
yeah,
first of all,
yeah.
I almost became like a vegan after like it was so terrifying. I love steak too much, but it was
Mhm.
close. But turned out perfect fit for me. I did well. I ended up graduating as the honor student of the year.
Wow.
And it and then it prepared me. It was the best education I've had, including Harvard. And
Wow.
if you look at it on paper, we do this all the time with kids. Oh, there's an honors program. Well, if you didn't succeed in this
Mhm.
one side, like it doesn't work like that. It is entirely about fit. And so for me, that gave me the confidence that if I really dedicated the time to know myself and be honest about my strengths and weaknesses, that I could make decisions that put me in a really good position to succeed. And everything I've learned as a scientist,
Mhm.
everything since tells me this is a universal truth, and that's like it's really about finding good fit. And so when we think about where we're headed in education towards something more personalized, it's not a gimmick or a fad. It's ensuring that every kid has an opportunity to have a phenomenally great fit in education.
Mhm. Mhm. So was okay. So you're honor student of the year at Weber State. Was Harvard always like the goal, or was it like, hey, I'm going to apply to
I
these few, or how did that all work?
I had no idea where Harvard was. Like, it just where I grew up. If you went to college at all, you went to the local college, and it just never dawned on me. But what had happened was when I was almost through my schooling, one of my mentors said, "Listen, everything you care about around individuality, there's a whole new science that's emerging around this, and it's being led by." My mentor at Weber State, one of his name, Dr. Eric Amsel, he said, "Listen, I know this guy, Kurt Fisher, who's leading this new science of individuality." And so I actually asked for one, those academic books, and they're just like the white covers. They have nothing exciting, but it was like $100 for the book. So I asked for it for Christmas, and he had written it, and it was just blew my mind. It was this completely different way of thinking about human beings, and it was so exciting. I was like, I want to be a part of this. And when Kurt had written the book, he was at the University of Denver, and I was like, great, that's like 8 hours up the road, right? Well, then I go to figure out as I'm going to apply, and he's like, oh shoot, he's at Harvard. And I'm like, well, first of all, I got to figure out where Harvard's at. Second of all, I
Oh,
was like, well,
jeez.
that's probably not like. So I knew I was
So
going to
you
go to
truly
grad
didn't
school.
know where Harvard was at. You truly didn't
No,
know.
no,
Wow.
and so I started applying to grad schools. No one in my family had ever gone to grad school, and so I followed this. I applied to like safety schools and all this stuff, and then like
Uh-huh.
Harvard. And I actually almost when I was applying, because we were like eating ramen noodles really, and these things are expensive to apply to.
Uh,
And there was a moment where Harvard wanted more, and it would cost more money to apply. And I literally crumpled up the paper because it was back then it was still paper, like, and
uh,
threw it. I threw it away, and my wife came in. She said, "I said, listen, I'm just doing this for vanity, right? Like I." And she said, "You can live with getting rejected, but if you don't find out, you'll never forgive yourself, right? To not know." And so we did it, and then I got in, and we
uh.
packed up everything we everything we had in a minivan with a little U-Haul in the back. Which, by the way, I learned a valuable lesson about weighting the trailer the right way, because I front loaded it, and so I would start fishtailing.
Sure,
So we
sure.
drove across the country at like 45 miles an hour.
Oh gosh.
Uh, so and the last thing I'll say is I was like straight off the farm basically. I didn't realize there was a thing called toll roads. Like I didn't know those were a thing. And so we had saved up just enough money to get to Boston, and we hit Chicago, and suddenly they're charging me to drive on the roads. And so like by upstate New York, I literally we didn't have any more money. And so I finally was like, first toll road, I said, well, do you guys take checks? And they were like, nobody's ever asked us that. So I started writing checks the rest of the way.
Oh
Didn't have the money
wow.
to pay them. The checks all bounced. So they're like the
Oh
most
jeez.
expensive little trip. But yeah,
Oh my.
that was my beginning.
Okay, I'm glad I kind of pushed on that because that is just crazy. When you even when you said you crumpled up it reminded me of I think it was Stephen King who wrote like he's written so many books, but like one of his greatest books, tore it out, crumpled it up, threw it in a wastebasket, and the wife went and grabbed it and like it might have been Carrie or something, and
that's the same thing.
This is good. This is good. Keep it going.
Yeah, the same thing, and it's just you just think how funny life could be if you just if you lose your nerve and don't try and don't find out.
Okay, so gosh, there's so many different directions we could go here. So then you get to Harvard, and you clearly have this passion for learning about learning about the brain. Is that the mind, the brain, how it all works?
Brain, yeah.
So maybe keep going there. So the passion just kept going. It seems like. Maybe tell us a little bit more about your career at Harvard.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you that didn't start off that well either. My first class, so we get to Harvard. This is probably way more information than you want to know, but like we got like 4 hours, right? But we get to Harvard 6 days after we get to Boston, to Cambridge. We got in a car wreck, totaled our car. My son shattered his femur. We didn't know anyone. I had to use all my student loan money to pay for some hospital visits. So we didn't have enough. I didn't even have enough to get a haircut. So I shaved my own head. I show up at Harvard. I'm just so lovely people, but this is not. It might as well be a different planet, like from rural Utah. But I'm thinking, okay, you know what? At least I know I'm a good writer. I'm a good student. And I took this first class by Howard Gardner, who's a wonderful guy, but he's really tough. And it was like at 8 a.m, and I wrote my first paper, and I was so excited. And I get it back, and no kidding, he had handwritten at the bottom of the page, judging by the poor quality of work on this, I do not think you have the writing ability to succeed at graduate school. So that was a shock, because I thought I was a good writer. And here's the thing. I left school immediately and cried the whole walk back to my apartment thinking, what have I done? I've dragged my family across the country for my own pride. I don't belong here. But, I started realizing like, well, he's not being a jerk, right? And I started looking at what he was talking about, and I thought, you know what? I hate to say this, but he's not wrong. And so I didn't want to go to the graduate school writing sport because that seemed a little too tough. But I went to undergrad, and I went to this place, and I said, there was this young woman who was a second-year undergrad student who looked like she was 13. And I said, listen, I need some help. And she said, this is for undergrads. I said, okay, I just need some help. And she said, listen, if you'll come back, this is when my shift ends or whatever, She actually worked with me all semester on her own time, and made me a much better writer, and ended up getting an A in Howard's class.
Wow.
And so, but from there it just kept building, and I started working at like Mass General Hospital in brain imaging. I got to work with Kurt. We became really close. Phenomenal mentor. He recently passed away, but and then it blossomed. And what probably my proudest moment, because Kurt had founded this mind, brain, and education program, the first interdisciplinary program in the country of its kind. And one of my proudest moments is, when he retired, I became the second ever director of that entire program as a faculty member. And that was a really just wonderful. So basically at that time at Harvard, it was such a great time of this blossoming of this new science of individuality and getting away from group studies and focusing on individuals. And I got to do it in everything from neuroscience and genetics to learning and education. It just was so much fun.
Well, I just thought it was awesome how you just name dropped Howard Gardner. I'm like, is that like the Howard Gardner, like
the Howard Gardner
of like, and I just Gardner. Google searched it. Oh, he's only written like 50 books on creating minds and change mind research.
He is every bit as brilliant as advertised.
How did he like, pump out. I am getting off. How do you pump out so many books? It's just nuts. That's just
Well, now
nuts.
you
I
see,
mean,
now you see why. I'm like, I was a pretty good writer, but if you're comparing yourself to Howard Gardner, it's not a lot of people are going to measure up.
yeah.
So it was a whole new bar that I had to set for myself.
Okay, so you were told, you tried to get into the over at Weber State, you tried to get into the honors program. You were told, no, you're not good enough. In high school or in grammar school, you must have been told, no, you're not good enough.
Right.
At Harvard, you're told, no, this paper sucks. Like, did you use that like as motivation? I mean, was there part of
Yeah,
you that had a chip on your shoulder?
yeah, yeah,
Um, talk,
for sure. So
talk about that
I
a
was
little bit.
raised, yeah, I was raised by the most strongest willed woman you'll ever meet in your life in rural Utah, where at least when I was growing up there, women were supposed to be, they weren't supposed to be that outspoken. And my mom didn't care. And she was like, listen, they don't have to like you, but they will respect you. Only you're going to give away that. And so I knew that at a minimum, I couldn't be my mom's son if if I caved that easy. But then for a while, I did use the external motivation of I'll show you, but it did start to dawn on me in grad school that kind of motivation, that external motivation, will only get you so far. And if you're not careful, like, you can just as quickly find yourself like keeping other people down, or surrounding yourself with people that are mediocre because it makes you feel good about yourself. And that didn't seem like a very good long-term recipe. And so over time, I tried really hard and intentionally to refocus my comparison from myself versus other people to me over time, right? What do I want to accomplish, in this year, and how am I improving on something, anything, right, than I was before? And that became a much better way to think about growth and improvement.
Mm-hmm. So let's kind of tie up the Harvard School of Education there for a little bit, because we've been talking about it so much.
Sure.
So, those of us, you've said, like, rural United States, those of us here in the Midwest, when I knew you agreed to come on the show, I was like, I just want to know what it's like in the Harvard School of Education. And I know you were in the Graduate School of Education, but what are some of just maybe give us a glimpse of what it's like in the Harvard School of Education or graduate
Sure.
education. Is it mind blowing what goes on in those courses, or would it be similar to what we see in here in the Midwest and some of these state
Yeah.
universities? Or just kind of tell me a little
So
bit about that.
so here's how I think about it. So first of all, a wonderful institution. It really is. And there are some just ridiculously brilliant people, and I'm very grateful for that experience. But I also went to Weber State, which is an open enrollment school, right? And here's how I would describe the difference. It's not about the best in both places are the same. So I had phenomenal professors at Weber State. Eric Amsel, Bill McFaud, these people, they are best in class, and I would put them up against anyone. Same with my fellow students, right? The top tier, they would have been as great as anybody. The difference is there's just a lot more variation, right? In an open enrollment school, there were kids that probably shouldn't be there, right? There were kids that were like me, like, right, like that. And so you have a class with people who, are like, probably do need a lot of remediation, and people who could have been at Berkeley, but for financial reasons or whatever. And then at Harvard, that variation just narrows, right? And it's funny because it's like, I don't know. I think the best thing that Harvard taught me is, in a lot of ways, what we think good learning is learning to regurgitate other people's ideas, right? And that's not going to cut it. Like, you got to have your own views, and you got to be able to defend them. That was profoundly valuable to me. But in terms of the quality, like, I think that we've gotten obsessed, and it's ultimately why I had to leave. It's just, I love the place, the institution, I love the people, but I think there's something profoundly wrong with our higher education system, where we judge quality based on how few people you educate. Think about that. Like, false scarcity. Harvard hasn't added a single seat in like 60 years. And they couldn't. If they if they quadrupled the number of students they taught, they would fall in the US News and World Report rankings.
Uh,
Like it's,
yeah.
and so there's this weird game of like, how much money can we take and how few people can we educate? And it's not Harvard's fault. This is how the system's structured. And that is so toxic and so bad for our society. And so I am way more obsessed about what our public education system can do now. And so I look to places like Southern New Hampshire University, Arizona State University, as I think those are the places that are leading us into what quality higher education will look like in the
Mm.
future.
You talked about that top in Dark Horse, correct? And we're going to talk about your
Yeah,
books about that. It's limited the number of people who can get in all kinds of programs as adults or in higher ed, whatever it
yeah,
is, in education. Correct. And that was one of the biggest takeaways I had was just that idea about they've not increased any seats for the last, that you just mentioned it for so
yeah.
long.
It's so silly. Like it's just
Is there anything else? And I appreciate you being so honest about it. So before the show, you mentioned, you just left Harvard this past year. Do you care if I just read kind of that quote you gave me in your email?
sure,
Is that
of
okay?
course.
So you said, I love the people there, but fundamentally disagree with how higher education is structured and felt like I was being a hypocrite sticking around. Is there anything else? I mean, this is just fascinating for
Yeah.
me,
Eh, eh,
because I mentioned before the show, there's this kind of, there's a little bit of friction between K through 12 and higher ed here everywhere. Here in Iowa, we feel like they're not doing enough to prepare, they feel like we're not doing enough to prepare students for their courses. We feel like they're not preparing the teachers for our buildings.
yeah.
And it just kind of this back and forth. Is there anything else you want to share from the reason behind your frustrations there?
Yeah, it's it really is that I feel like the incentive structures in higher education, like, my dad's an engineer and he went to school and got trained to be an engineer. And at the end of the day, it wouldn't really matter how good you are in theory if the things you learn don't actually like prepare you to do a job, right? And I think that there's a pretty big disconnect in higher education where the incentives are it's fine to do research, and there's some really good and valuable research. But the reality is that the folks on the ground have as their job the cultivation of an entire new generation of talent and human potential and kids. And like, it's just, it. And so the problem is, and you see this from the science of individuality, like the reality is behavior is contextualized. So if I'm going to give you some generic insights about average like learning, and then when it doesn't really work because we're talking about Wichita, Kansas or something that has real constraints, or like, you can't turn around and blame the people on the ground for not implementing your theory right. Like, and so I feel like what we've never done in education in particular is we've never created the actual loop between research and practice. At best, we say, look at this cool research I did. You should love it and do something about it. We really don't listen to the people on the ground who are actually doing the work and saying, listen, this is what I'm seeing. This is what I'm seeing, and putting that into a feedback loop that informs the kind of research that you do, right? Like that would be, we can do that, right? But the problem is, again, if you're trying to be a high ranking college, like the incentive structures aren't for that, right? They're just not. They're about a completely different game you're playing, which I think is actually antithetical to actually enriching our public education system. And again, it's not Harvard. It's not anything, like wonderful people, wonderful institution. It's the incentive structures of the whole system. And the good news is it's so darn expensive that it's about to burst anyway. Like this thing is not going to be the same after this pandemic. It's just not.
Oh man, I just love how you're just being so real about some of the struggles. You made me, first of all, just your knowledge is a little intimidating for me to kind of stay on your level of understanding here, but I'm going to try to do something that connect to what I just recently experienced. Was a professor here in the state of Iowa sent an email to all the administrators and said, hey, which of these academic journals do you read? And I'm one of the most well-read people in the state, probably in term. I read all the time books, but honestly, I don't look at many academic journals at all. And I know academics and universities are pumping out, like, that's part of their job, is to pump out these peer-reviewed articles. But honestly, those of us in the trenches, I know very few people who spend time reading those, unless
Yeah,
you're working on,
why would you?
unless you're working on your dissertation, which I had
Right,
to do.
right.
That's about the only time. So it's like, I mean, we look at the, I know that, and that's why I appreciate somebody who like actually goes and puts a book together that for educational leaders. Cause to me, that's a
Yeah.
lot. For whatever reason, that is more ingrained in my mind. I'm going to go and read that book as opposed to dig through these academic journals, which I don't even know how to get to half the time.
Yeah, and half
Uh,
the time they're behind a paywall that you can't even get to anyway.
yeah.
So it's well, for me, it's like I felt like, what good is the knowledge if you're not actually getting it to people who actually could do something with it? And one of my all-time like intellectual heroes, Richard Feynman, right, the physicist, he used to say, you know, if you can't explain your ideas to an intelligent first year college student, you don't understand them, right? And I took that
Uh,
to heart, that like it's not enough to know it in your own head. Learning how to connect to people in their context in ways that are relevant to them is what it means to really know something in my mind. And so I take a lot of pride. I was really proud, like end of average, of trying to take this new science and distill it down in ways that is still true to the science, but more useful to people who might be able to do something.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about it. So you co-founded the Center for Individual Opportunity, and then and then
Yeah,
and then currently it's called Populace, right?
yeah,
You switched in. So tell us a little bit more about that. I thought it was
yeah.
fascinating. I got a follow-up question or two for you on that, but you've shared a little bit. Why don't you share a little bit more, and then I might
Sure.
ask you a follow-up question.
Yeah, I'm excited. So yeah, first of all, Populous, it's so funny. What it taught me is I'm terrible at naming things. So I thought, hey, Center for Individual Opportunity, and then I'm taking the science of individuality and trying to bring it into like real life things. And then, it actually, frankly, around the 2016 election, for whatever reason, like middle of the road people started interpreting it as like rugged individualism, as if I was like, I don't know, like it's just bizarre, because what I care about is like what Populace is after, and this will sound a little wonky, but I think it's important. I think people operate under the assumption that the world is zero sum, like that somebody has to lose for me to win. And it's just not true. It's absolutely empirically false. You think about free markets are the manifestation of the fact that economies aren't zero sum, right? You can produce abundance, but think about like educational opportunities and human flourishing. Our structures, they are all built on the assumption that some kids have to lose. You think about our standardized tests on bell curves guarantee that half the kids have to fail. Like it doesn't even matter how well they do. Half of them are going to have to be below average, by like, not because they are, but because we're going to force it to be true. So Populace is about taking these insights, and we think we have a good understanding of how you shift culture and systems to make our democracy positive sum, right? Where we see everybody's got something to contribute.
Mhm.
Human distinctiveness matters. And how do we cultivate that in everyone for the benefit of everyone? And so I think we're doing some cool things there. But I thought calling it Center for Individual Opportunity wouldn't, but like people start saying, well, you obviously don't mean everyone, if that. And I was like, well, that's not what we mean. So Populace, I'm proud of, because it means the people. And in French, it's like derogatory. It's kind of like, oh, the people, right? And so I kind of like that. But so it's stuck and it works. But yeah,
So you identify, okay. So I read through kind of the goals of when you created, at least the center for,
yeah,
whatever you want to call it. So one of the biggest goals was improving methods for identifying, developing, and rewarding employee talent, which I thought was, I love that just topic, or that
yeah.
discussion. What's your belief, or what have you discovered in terms of identifying, developing, rewarding employee talent?
Yeah. So if you take these insights from that I covered at end of average, which are around the principles of individuality, instead of type and rank out of averages, understanding human jaggedness, contextualized behavior, multiple pathways, you realize that it doesn't just apply to education or even medicine. It would apply to how we think about the corporate environment, where, I mean, we call it a career ladder. Like, it's like one set, like, here you go. This is, you go to this school, you get into this, job, you start off here, you climb the ladder. And, my dad's experience really hammered home. He'll kill me for bragging about him, but he's one of the most acclaimed airbag engineers. So he's got something, I mean, he's probably saved more lives for this, like, just amazing, right? Well, he's invention after invention after invention. He works at this company, he just retired. But at some point, they're like, well, listen, if you want to make more money, you're at the top of engineering. You've got to go into management. But like, what? Wait, why? Why would you move someone out of the place where they are the most productive and most fulfilled just because that's just the way it works, right? And they made an exception for him, but it's like, why does that have to be an exception? So we've done a lot of work with companies, and are doing some stuff that will be public later this year as well, really trying to get rid of this standardized view of how you think about identifying talent, how you build environments at work that are able to get the most out of people, so that people can be fulfilled at work and productive. And so that's everything from, I mean, some really basic stuff, man. Like, why in the world are we using what college did you go to and what's your GPA as, like, are we going to hire you, when there's so many better ways? Like my colleague Lou Adler, who did performance-based hiring, it's unbelievable. It's literally, who cares where you went to school? Show me that you have done this kind of work. Like, seems so obvious, but their track record in terms of, like, placing talent and having it stick around and do it is just second to none. So the other thing is thinking about, we have these job descriptions, and then people get into roles, and you get hired to fill a role, and it's like, that's not a terribly smart way to do things, right? Like, there's some core things you need people to do, but then what you do, and some of the best companies we work with do this now, which is the management's job in the first 3 months after hiring is to then work with the person they've hired, figure out their jaggedness and their passions, and then reconfigure the job around that. And it's not rocket science, but you get more productive, creative employees who actually stick around. And I think that, like, coming out of this pandemic, you're going to see a pretty big shift in, a lot of folks are rethinking what they want out of work. We're doing a lot of this private opinion research right now, and man, people are sick of the old way of thinking about this. They want more purpose and meaning and fulfillment, and I think they're going to be way more demanding of it. And I think companies that don't respond are going to get left behind.
So I've come up with 2 questions here. That I didn't give you ahead of time, but I'm curious what you would say. And you seem like you're very natural at answering questions off the cuff. So if you were in my shoes, a superintendent or a principal, as many of our listeners are, and you mentioned hiring practices, you mentioned not looking at the GPA in the college, you mentioned, other ways of looking at the interview. What would you recommend to us what should the hiring process look like if we're trying to hire the best teachers? What would you do if you suddenly woke up tomorrow and you have a hire to do for a high school? I don't care, a high school math teacher. What would you have them do to rather than the old traditional? Let's look at their application. Let's see where they came from. Let's drill them for 50 minutes. Ask them a dozen questions. What would you do?
Yeah. So this is always the dangerous thing of telling someone how to do their job when I don't know how to do your job. But so forgive me if this will be stuff that you already do. But I think the same thing, which is, like, first of all, I literally don't care where you went to school, and I don't care, like, what does it mean? Unless it's I think the same lessons apply whether you're at, Costco or some of these other really great places that are crushing it here, or a high school, which is, listen, there is a job in a context that needs to be done. And right now we look at things like, well, wait, have you ever taught this subject? Okay, fine. But I want to know, like, show me that you actually have experience right? And I don't like, I know this is way too labor intensive, but I think there's nothing beats actually seeing people interact, right? I mean, I mean, not to like, it sounds like I'm just, saying nice things, but I honestly I can't think of a harder job than being a teacher. And because look, here's why. What we know about public opinion, where people don't want better from K-12 right now. They want different. They are fed up with the outcomes. They don't want better standardized tests. They see their kids as whole children. They want, and teachers, you get in the business because you believe in kids, because you want to cultivate kids. And then there's a structure in place that makes you do things that are like so much different, right? So here's a job where you have to literally do things that aren't really part of your instincts to cater to a system that's still rigidly standardized. Meanwhile, you care about kids and you believe in them and you're trying to cultivate their abilities and potential. And that is unbelievably difficult, right? So I think there is when I think about, for all the bad experiences I had, I'm also like profoundly grateful because I had phenomenally good teachers too, right? Like amazing teachers. And I think what's so undervalued, yes, I need you to know the content, of course, right? But there is something about great teachers and their ability to connect to kids that is like magical. And when you see that happen, it is unbelievable that the kids they can reach and what can happen. And I don't think we really pay attention to that. I really don't. I think, and then what do we do when they're in the system? Okay, you want to make a little more money? Well, you got to go get a master's degree. Why? Like, it's just like, so I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
it's you're the expert of this, but I just think like I am so frustrated to the point of like why in the world do we keep centralizing and standardizing control of these things when like if you don't trust teachers and you don't trust principals, the game's already over. Like you've already lost. But the truth is you can trust them and you can empower them. And that even goes to like the hiring, right? Like it's just, so sorry, this is my rant about like,
No,
it's just like,
love it.
we have to get back to local control. We have to get back to trusting the teachers, the people that are the closest to our kids, right?
Yeah.
And instead, in the name of like false precision and the illusion of control, we standardize the crap out of everything. And it's just like
Yeah.
we strip them from being able to do the things that they're really fantastic at.
I love that answer. I mean, not really, being in our world, I think you nailed it. I love how you said, I want to see their interactions. It's so true. And that's something that, we have our, a lot of schools have, they'll watch a lesson and they'll watch the teacher, the candidate teach a lesson. And in the COVID era, it's become more difficult to do that depending on if you're doing virtual learning or not. But that whole like employee interaction thing, I think is just huge. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I've read, like Patrick Lencioni or, there's a bunch, Jim Collins is like, have them eat lunch with the team and see how it goes. Take them to lunch and see how their interactions are.
I see the interaction as colleagues, right? Because you got to work with these people. Second, like to paraphrase Maria Montessori, everything begins with the respect of the pupil. Like if this is someone who doesn't respect students, right? Doesn't care about them. I don't care what you know. I don't care how brilliant you are. You will not be a good teacher. And so it's the human interaction that I think is vital, and it's just missing from most of the way we think about hiring or promotion.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to have you put on your principal hat one more time, or your superintendent hat.
Great.
So if you were in my shoes and tomorrow you woke up and you're superintendent of a district and you want to implement this idea about having students find their pathways for individualized success, how would you structure that? What I know that's a tough question off the cuff, but like, how would you set up a system where students can explore and try to find what you just kind of like you did? Like, what is my true passion? How do I find success?
So this is the fun one where I don't have any responsibility and I don't know all the real constraints. So I get to just, here's the thing. This whole idea of like more personalized stuff, I feel like it's in danger of looking like so faddish, like we're just, but there's a few basic things that go into any successful model I've ever seen, right? Number one, um, it is always focused on mastery. Like like you just think about like we do fixed time and a test. Sometimes it's normed if it's a big test, which means we're not even really measuring what you know, we're just comparing you to a hypothetical average kid. But like, it sounds like this idea of mastery somehow is going to take so much more time. But the truth is the research is crystal clear on this, that done right, it actually doesn't. And kids that are, there's like no real relationship between speed and ability. It just doesn't exist. And the kid that's a little faster and better in math is not the kid that's faster and better in reading. And so getting a little bit of flexibility and the ability to listen, you're going to master this material before you move on. I'll tell you right now, I don't think you're going to see a school system that survives that. That's not the backbone of it. Because listen, when you get outside, think about how crazy this is. Let's say you want to be a surgeon. We give them mastery assessments because if every one of them passes, they can cut on me. But I don't care. Could you imagine if we're like the top 10% get to pass no matter what? Like they get A's. And you're like, no. They don't get a cut me open just because they were in a really crummy cohort and they're the best of the worst. So this master thing is critical. Benjamin Bloom started that work 40, 50 years ago. That's been the backbone of most stuff. And there's some great things going on with Mastery Transcript Consortium, things like this. So that is going to be the way of the future. It's interesting, a lot of this has been in good teaching for a long time around project-based learning, stuff like that. But it's so interesting. If I were king for a day, I would say, listen, at some point we need to know like that you've mastered material. But I think we start doing this and grading kids way too early, because like I actually think that early on, it's about discovering what you care about and also what you don't care about. It's funny. The former president of Harvard way back when, Charles Eliot, had a proposal. This is way back when. He had a proposal to literally make high school completely electives. That's it. And he was like, kids should discover like widely that should be the goal, right? To really, and we're probably not going to go there, but I think this aspect of like giving kids the ability to try stuff. When we living in Cambridge, watching my two sons go to this it's public education, but everything was about like, what college are you going to go to, right? And I watched my son go from like being so curious and exploring things to he wanted to take a French literature class, and then he was like, I can't do it because what if I don't do well in that class? He's a math major, computer science, and he's like, it will affect my ability to get into a college. And I was like, that's actually true, and it shouldn't be true. And I was like, this is wrong, right? This is not good. So this sense of like, we're so hung up on the efficiency of moving kids through that we don't actually give them the time to discover who they are. And I think we do great detriment to them and to society. So I'd get fired as a superintendent, right? That's not a good answer.
I wish we could. I mean, everything you're saying, that idea about just do electives, it's just like you'd have to blow up the system. You really would.
It's really, really hard to do it in the system as it's structured. It just is.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about. I'm looking at all my I feel like we've hit like every question that I had about end of average and dark horse. I want to ask you a little. You have a new book coming out. Is that correct? Collective Illusions.
Yeah. I just finished the draft. I finished the draft just now. So this is good.
Geez. Well, can you tell us a little bit about what to expect in Collective Illusions?
Yeah. So part of our work at Populace is we've developed like everything we want to do, which is transform systems to respond to public values. Like education should serve the values of the public, not the other way around. But it really doesn't respond very well to that. Same with medicine, same with just about all our institutions. So we developed methods to understand private values and opinions, because that like social pressure distorts public opinion. People don't say everything that they really believe out loud. And so we've been doing some, I think, pretty groundbreaking work there around the kind of lives people want to live, their views of success. We just came out with one on aspirations, the future of the country. What are our trade-off priorities for the future of the country? And how divided are we really? It turns out not nearly like you think, but like one of the things we always ask is, what do you think? And then what do you think most Americans would say? Because it turns out that like your behavior is a mix of what you care about and then what do I think the norm is? What do I think most people think? That's the safe answer. That's the safe behavior. And here's what we found. It is so shocking to me. It doesn't matter where we look. The common theme is we are spectacularly wrong about each other, like crazy wrong. And so we call these collective illusions because we're literally in almost every place we have these hidden majorities who are convinced that they are a tiny minority in society. And that is so damaging for a democracy. When and you think about like I'll give you an example in our success index where we looked at the trade-off priorities people have in private for what a successful life looks like. In private, and you can't game these methodologies, it's so cool. And we can literally get deep trade-offs, like what are the rank order priorities you have. In private, most Americans care about a combination of like character and relationships and education. It's not zero sum, it's wonderful. And it cuts across all demographics, okay? Except for they believe most Americans care about fame and status and wealth, and it's just dog eat dog. And to put a finer point on it, out of the 70 some odd attributes that you could trade off, the vast majority of Americans believe that almost all Americans care about being famous as the number one thing for a successful life. In private, it is actually dead last, number 76 out of 76. We couldn't be more wrong about each other. But here's the problem with these collective illusions. Okay, so if I think most people are just like, oh, you're all zero sum, you think you're just you'll slit my throat to get $1 if you have to, you'll like this. How am I going to interact with my fellow citizens? How am I'm looking and thinking, you don't share my values. I'm weird. I don't think someone has to lose. Why is that true? But I think everybody else thinks it, right? So it distorts my behavior. It starts to isolate me from my community. It starts to the breakdown of social trust. The moral foundation of trust is shared values. And what we've got in America today are unbelievably consistent shared values across ideology, across demographics, across geography, but we don't realize it. So we are literally like destroying ourselves from the inside out. So collective illusions, I wrote it because I was like, it's not enough to just do these reports. Like this book is going to show you why it is we're so wrong about each other, how our social nature has been hijacked by our social media, our technology. It's distorting who we are, and then show you how do we inoculate ourselves against that, and how do we get to a better society.
That can I pre-order? Because that sounds awesome.
Yeah. I'll send you a free copy. Yeah,
dude.
I'm more excited about this. I think it's timely, and I think that like it could just imagine for a minute if most of our problems in society right now are not about our true differences, they are about our misunderstandings of each other. Like if that's true, and it is, I mean, we have more data than anybody in the country on this. Mm-hmm. If it's true, then it changes how we solve it, but it also means it is solvable, right? Like in our aspirations one on the future of America, right?
Yeah.
The top aspirations for people are so remarkably similar. Like out of the 55 possibilities for a great society across race, class, age, we share 8 out of the 10 in common, including a deep commitment to individual rights, healthcare for everyone, even addressing climate change is a top priority for people. Like we're just not, somehow we have been convinced that we are so different. And then we start seeing each other as out groups, right? And we get polarized. It's just so like we're in a much better place than we think as a country if we can just get past these misunderstandings.
Yeah, love it, man. And you kind of the last question I was going to ask you about was that 2019 MSNBC interview about success. So you kind of nailed it. You kind of talked about
Well,
it. You nailed it.
let me give you the consequence of this. So we think, so what, that we're wrong about that people think everyone wants fame. Well, this is what gets advertised to us. And worse than that,
Yeah.
it's what's advertised to our children. So UCLA has been tracking middle school kids for decades as they kind of become, like, trying to have a sense of self. Up until about 5 years ago, every year, the top themes that emerged from these kids were all character related. I want to be a good person. I want to be a good friend. All the stuff you would hope that
Yeah.
12-year-olds think about. About 5 years ago, it changed. And every year since, it is, I want to be famous. I want to be a YouTube star. So how sad is this, that we are operating under an illusion that we think everybody wants fame and we really don't. And so we get advertise it and we say, see, that's further proof that everybody wants it. And we all are living under the illusion. Our kids aren't in on the joke. Our kids are in on the thing that it's not real. They're internalizing that illusion as their private values. I mean, so we have to solve for this.
Yeah. So, hey, if I'm just going to sit to kind of move this forward here. If you like these topics we're talking about, you got to check out these 3 books that Todd has thrown out there. Like I said, The End of Average, Dark Horse, and coming soon. When can we expect Collective Illusions, do you think? How 6 months out? How far out are you?
Yeah, the end of the year. You can pre-order it in like September probably. Now, but by the way, Jared, but we're not cutting off the time because I want those fun questions too, right?
Oh no, I'm still coming to the fun questions,
I'm
man.
Just making sure.
No, okay. Don't worry.
I prepared for them.
Well, hey, okay. If you're joining us about 50 minutes in here, actually about an hour. I'm sorry, Todd. This is Todd Rose, author of I just mentioned it. The End of Average, Dark Horse, Collective Illusions, has an amazing history from growing up in Ogden, Utah. Is that correct? Going to Weber State. What is their mascot? The
Wildcat.
The Wildcats. Okay. So going to Weber State, and then just having a cool history there, working at Harvard, starting a couple think tanks, and now kind of breaking free from the post-secondary world, and just going to keep pumping out some awesome stuff for us here. So like you mentioned, and I mentioned you before the show, we love digging into. And this has been so fascinating, just hearing from your perspective on the cutting edge of the research and where all the great ideas are coming from. But we focus on kind of education, the leadership, and then we kind of dig into like some of those practices of personal growth. I mean, obviously, you think a lot about how you improve, the thoughts that go into becoming better educated and understanding the world. So I'm really excited to ask you these fun questions, I guess you could say, about getting inside your mind. So you're currently, the first question is always like, hey, if we come to your city, where do we got to go? So where are you at currently? Are you in
just
Cambridge,
outside of Boston? Just outside of Boston.
Okay.
We build a house it's Burlington, Massachusetts, but we get to call it Greater Boston area.
Okay, man. Wow. Well, I mean, there's endless things to do, I would have to imagine there.
But this is an easy one.
Oh,
this is an easy one.
It is an easy one?
You have to go to Fenway Park.
Okay. Are you
even if you're not a baseball fan, you got to go to Fenway Park. It's a cathedral. It's just, listen, it is amazing. And I am a big Sox fan, but so I'm biased, but it is unbelievable. Like, it is such a great experience.
So let's see. Red Sox. I've kind of haven't been following baseball as closely as I did maybe, back when the Sox and the Yankees were going at it year after year after year. How are the Sox looking this year? Do they have a game yesterday? Not
great. And I apologize to my buddy Sam Kennedy, the Sox. Like, I'm hoping your season's going to be better, but it doesn't look very good. But I will say Fenway Park is amazing. In terms of my priorities, I am a Patriots fan. I have a weird mix of, I couldn't get into the Celtics. Like, listen, I've been like, because I'm still a Jazz fan, Utah Jazz fan, just my whole life. I can't give that up. But Fenway Park is just unreal. You got to go. And there's, by the way, when you go, there's a thing called the Green Monster, which is this
Yeah.
huge. Okay,
Yep.
they
Yep.
put seats on top of it now, so you can sit on top of it. It's unbelievable.
So, okay. Gosh, there's so many. Who's your favorite Sox player of all time?
That's Big Poppy.
Big
That's you
Poppy.
got to
Sure, sure,
David
sure.
Ortiz.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Awesome. How about favorite? I'll ask you one more. How about favorite game? Favorite any one game you could pick of Reds. And I know you've been out there for what, about 20 years or so?
20 years. So I've been so lucky because I when we came here a year later, it was Tom Brady's first year in the Patriots.
Oh
We won the
wow.
Super Bowl, and so I've been
Wow.
my whole Patriots thing. We weren't there yet when I started, so I wasn't just a bandwagon fan. But that's just the most spoiled football fan
Oh
ever,
gosh.
right? It was a little tough to watch him win a Super Bowl in Tampa
Oh.
Bay, but oh, that was tough. But my favorite game. Look, I mean, the 2004 that stretch of games against
Yeah.
the Yankees. I mean, just you got to be kidding me. And it was so crazy because it was like I've never seen anything like it. Like if you had Sox tickets, that's like legitimate reason not to show up to work. Like literally, like people like, oh yeah, of course you got Sox tickets. It's like, wait, that's not a thing. How's that a thing, right? But it's just it's hard to explain. Like lots of towns love their sports, but it is like religion here, and it is so woven into the fabric of like who we are. It's just fantastic.
Wow, that's so cool. I could probably talk. I am a big sports fan, and so just hearing some of the, it's always fascinating to hear from people who live in different parts of the country. You know, the teams they root for, their perspectives, their best memories. So was the one last was the '04? Was that the Kurt Schilling,
Bloody
the
sock.
ankle, the bloody sock game?
Mm.
Okay,
How like this is the that whole sequence from 2004 2007, like just those things that just, yeah, you don't see those kind of games,
wow,
right? It was
wow.
just, I mean, that was like, look, I think young players are great too, but like that was just, I mean, people were just leaving it all, and I mean, just
Yeah.
it was unbelievable. And the whole city, we'd gone so long, like so long without a championship, so it was just unbelievable.
Wow. So cool. So cool. Okay, man. Hey, next question. What is one up to $50 purchase you've made in the last year that has made life easier?
so so uh this is like pandemic related.
Yeah.
So I was not a pajamas guy or a slippers guy until the
Neither
pandemic.
neither was I.
And
Yeah.
now, yeah, now I'm a pajamas guy, and I've got these, my wife bought them for me, these very fuzzy LL Bean, like ridiculous slippers, and they're so comfortable, and I just like putt around. So like I feel like I got more out of those slippers
Awesome.
than I have about just about anything else.
That's awesome. Now, I'm curious, are kids back to school in Massachusetts? Are they virtual, or what's the
So
latest
they've
in
been
K-12?
virtual. They've started to go a little hybrid. They're turning around now to say everybody's going back now. But it's been, boy, what a like
Wow.
what a uh, what a crazy experience.
Yeah. Okay. So you got the slippers. That's the first answer I've got. You know, I've done 60 episodes, and first time slippers has been mentioned. So yeah.
New for me.
Yeah. Okay, man. I'm curious on this. I know you're well read. What is the one book that has greatly influenced your life?
So this is one where, okay, I'm a reformed academic, so I can't break type all the time. But this is it's gonna sound wonky, but it was so important to me. So normally I don't like philosophers, but I like Karl Popper, this philosopher of science, and it's worth reading. Like anyone, so he wrote a book called The Logic of Scientific Discovery, and it completely changed my view of what science really is. Because you think of it's like this collection of facts, but it's not. It is so
Mm.
counter authority. It is literally bold claims that are testable. That's all that matters, right? And the bolder the claim, the better. And it completely changed how I thought about my own work as a scientist. And I believe if it weren't for that, I would, like, I'm constantly looking both for the most out there ideas that are falsifiable. And then what he taught me in reading it is that it is my job to immediately try to falsify my own ideas. It's not, my job is not to protect my ideas like and hold them dear like a child. It is to, the only way we get to truth is through the elimination of error. So, it's just, and if someone ever wants to read, like, he also wrote a book called The Open Society and Its Enemies during the rise of Nazism, which was this impassioned defense of free societies. I love it. And the last thing I'll say about Karl Popper is the way he would write, which I think is so brave. So before he would take on an idea and he would write the best defense of that idea. And he would send it to the people who held that idea and say, does this represent your view? And until they said, oh, absolutely it does, he wouldn't stop. And then he would absolutely just decimate it after that. But it was like, no straw man, like really give the other side the fullest defense of their views. And then if you can criticize it, do it. But I just think like that is a lost art today. And we need to recover that.
Okay, next question here, Todd. What is one phone app that has positively influenced your life?
This is big for me.
Yeah.
And this will tie into productivity and personal improvement. I studied neuroscience. I did a lot of work around working memory, and like we suck at holding things in our minds. And anyone who thinks you can organize yourself in your head is fooling themselves. And so you've got to get a good organizing system. And the faster you learn that system, you'll be shocked. So there's two things. So I'm cheating here that I couldn't live without on the phone.
Let's hear it.
Evernote, that literally is where I keep everything, every meeting I have, every thought I have, and it's just easy. The second one is called Things, and it is my task management system that is based on a philosophy called getting things done, and it has made me like 10x in terms of performance and like productivity.
Awesome. Okay, so Things, you said Things, right? It's an app.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so explain that a little bit more, because I love David Allen. I love getting things done. What do you do in Things?
It's literally, keeps your set of priorities, every project I'm working on. Here we go. Like this is every project I have going. And then it allows me to prioritize and surface the things that I got to do today, things that I could do next if I've got time. And why is this important? I'm not, you don't want to get too over the top of this stuff, but like we all have a million things to do. And if you're not careful, you end up doing like last in, first out, like other people's priorities end up dominating. This allows me to be able to focus on what I want to accomplish and stay prioritizing those things. And I don't know that I could live without it. It has made all the difference in the world.
If you're looking, so I referenced it real quick. I've referenced it in my blogs a number of times. David Allen, Getting Things Done. I always say to me, the first like 100 pages of that book kind of start off slow. To me, it did. And then once he gets to like how he processes his inbox and how he does, it's like, it is like, that is my Bible for this. And you know what I did? I think any parent right now, like I literally bribed my kids when they were in high school. I said, read this book, use that. If you practice this, because you don't need it right now, but practice it. And if any free time they got after it by being more organized, they got free video game time, right? More video game time. Ooh.
And to both of them now as professionals, they're 26, 24, they would say like, this has made them like, it basically allows them to be incredibly productive and have more time for themselves and fun time. I think that like there is nobody on the planet that can process information that's like coming at us now. Like you need a good system, get anything done. There's nothing better. And Things is by far the simplest, most intuitive app for implementing that in my mind.
So you took me down this productivity route, and I feel like with everything that you do, you should, for those of us who couldn't see his app, he has like 40 projects going right now.
Right.
I got like 2 more quick hitter. I've added these as we're going. First question. Do you meditate?
I do.
Okay. And what do you do? I'm just curious.
Like, so by the way, my wife would say, no, you don't. She really does. My brain doesn't turn off. It just is always going. And, that's great in a lot of ways. But if you're not careful, like it's not great. It's not great for sleeping. But what I found is that just the ability to just breathing exercises, just to recenter on breath, and allows me to just like slow my mind down, has been really important in terms of, weirdly, some of the best insights I've ever had comes with a little more calm mind. And here's where I get to name drop. This is my like, so I actually learned this from the Dalai Lama himself. So we were doing an event together in DC where it was about contemplative traditions and neuroscience and how we might work together. And we were having lunch, and someone called in a bomb threat. And so they locked us down, and it was me, His Holiness, and two other people for 4.5 hours.
What?
And he is just this amazing guy. And he was like so great. And I just asked him a million questions, and he was so generous. It was so fantastic. It was like one of the best experiences of my life. Probably the worst for him, but it was great for me.
Wow. I mean, I don't know, I just have read that people will, I don't know where he normally is at, if it's in Tibet or what. I get confused, but people who like climb mountains and stand in line for days to ask one question of the Dalai Lama, and then they go on their way, so you had to spend 4 hours with them. That's crazy.
Yeah. In retrospect, I probably would have called the bomb threat in myself if I would have known how it was going to turn out. So this is great.
Oh my gosh. That is nuts. That is nuts. Okay. And I know, Todd, thanks for being such a great guest here. I got a couple more.
Sure.
What's your writing routine? Are you a morning writer? You just fill us in.
Yeah. So I've had to, because I have a full-time job, right? So how I work is, I wasn't a morning person before. I am now, because it's the only time I get quiet. So I get up 4:30 every morning. From 4:30 to 8, I write.
Wow.
Like no matter what, every day, no matter what. And I just have to, and I try not to be too precious about it. Just write. And then from 8:30 to 5, I work. And then I realized that if I don't do something like keeping my physical health, right? So then I go and I have a trainer, and and now here's where, I also love TV and movies. And so, during the pandemic, I bought an ultra short throw projector and a 120-inch screen and those movie theater chairs. And so then I'll go home, like after this, I'm gonna go home, we'll have dinner. I'm gonna kick back in those chairs and watch TV.
Wow. Well, you deserve it after 3.5 hours of writing in the morning before work. I do 2 hours, and that pushes it.
It's tough.
That is impressive. That is impressive.
It's tough, but it's, I enjoy it, and I use the books to force myself to be clear about my own ideas. And so it's valuable that way.
Sure. Okay. Hey, let's lighten things up a little bit. What's your go-to item? Well, let's ask you this. What's the big gas stations out, convenience store gas stations out? You're not.
Yeah. We got Sitco and stuff like that. But here's so this is where, anyone who cares about like nutrition is going to kill me. Diet Mountain Dew. and so I love Diet Mountain Dew. And so we used to drive across country, and it was like Diet Mountain Dew and sunflower seeds. The sunflower seeds are a nasty habit, but that's my go-to thing.
So are you, and I'm not really a pop drinker, but are you a fountain pop? Are you a bottle? What do you usually,
like the fountain stuff's better, but I'm usually just like whatever caffeine. So, and I'm trying to be a little more mature. I got a nice drip coffee machine now, and can't quite get into tea, but I probably should. I know every time I drink this Diet Mountain Dew, I'm like, this really can't be good for me. But
what about when you're writing in the morning at 4:30? Are you drinking caffeine?
Yeah, I have coffee. And then at night, not every night, but I'm a single malt Scotch guy. That's my.
No, I like how at night you're able to relax and have a little fun.
Yeah, right.
Like you're not.
Basically, I'm chemicaled up from morning to night.
Jeez. Wow. Okay. Can you recall a job you applied for but did not get?
Yeah. Two of them. One, in my streak of like really terrible in ways jobs, I applied for a job at Circuit City as a assistant manager, and they they said you could be a salesperson if you want, but we're not gonna. Why would we make you a manager? Which is fair because I would be a terrible manager. The other one, which I was a little more disappointed in, is when I was close to graduating, I got, well, I would say recruited, but I was part of the Institute of Politics at Harvard, and I got recruited to apply for the CIA, which I can say that now. It was like this, and I went through a lot. Like they dug into my background, and like it was a little intrusive. And then I was like, well, okay. Like, and by the way, I realized it's not like as cloak and dagger as I thought it would be. I don't know what I thought it was going to be. I was like, this is so cool, and I was really excited about it. And then it was like I get a call, and they're like, we've decided we're not interested. And I was like, oh, okay, well, can I, like, what can I work on? And they literally were like, that's really all the information we can share with you.
Wow.
I'm like, the only information you can share with me is you're no longer interested. So I don't know. I feel like that was probably for the best. I don't know, but I thought that I was so excited about it, and then yeah, after all that, they just weren't interested. So well, I don't know what I could learn from it, but
that's crazy. You know, but I've been asking this question for the last 20 episodes, and I think almost every person has said, I'm glad it didn't work out.
Yeah.
I'm glad it didn't work out, you know?
Yeah. That's, you know.
So so kind of closely associated, what's your you've had a lot of, earlier in your life, you had a lot of failures and you learned from those failures. What is your favorite failure?
You know, I really do. And we already covered this, but I mean, you know, you're right. Like, I think I'm not afraid of failure. That's the good news, right? You don't feel like I've failed and fear failure anymore. Like, who cares, right? Like, I've been poor before. I could be poor again. Like, failing doesn't really, whatever. I'm not going to hold back my life. I think the Howard Gardner thing is so important because, again, like, I hate when people say, oh yeah, failure is great. No, it's not. Failure sucks. Failure, no one likes failure. But it was the first time that I really felt like, rather than just say, well, screw you, all this, it was like, stay in that pain for a minute and be honest about whether or not there's a there. Is he right in any way? And to recognize that, yeah, I think he could have been a little nicer about it, right? But like, he wasn't wrong. And it would have been a great disservice to let me go on thinking that everything was fine. And now, like, I'm proud of the fact that my last two books were bestsellers. There's no way I would have even imagined being a commercial author. So, you know, that for me is my favorite failure because it had such an immediate and lasting impact on me.
That's awesome. Okay. We talked about your daily routine a little bit. The other question associated with that is your best tip for being productive. You talked about getting things done. You talked about Evernote. Is there anything else you want to share about productivity tip or hack?
Yep. I think the biggest mistake that we make about productivity, about grit, about all this stuff is that we don't think enough about the upfront passion, about the upfront motives. So I'll give you a quick story that, you know, since we've got 4 hours, right? So I used to get up early to go to work. I was living in an apartment in Cambridge, and I'd get up early, and every time I would see this woman who could be getting out to go for a run, which I just like, are you kidding me? You couldn't pay me to run anyway, let alone getting up before the sun's up. And I was always so impressed. Like, so much determination and self-control, and like, I just couldn't do it. So after about a year of this, I'm coming out, and she says, hey, look, she says, I'm sorry, you don't know me, but like, I see you getting up every morning. Like, what, why? And she's like, do you have to? I said, no, I you know, I'm a professor and I do this work. And she's like, but wait, why are you getting up this early? Like, and I said, oh, I just love it. There's not enough time in the day, right? I gotta get. And she was like, wow, I don't think I could do that. And then I was like, wait, I said, I think the same about you. I see you get up every day. And I'm like, how do you run? And she's like, I love running. I would run for a living if I could. And immediately it dawned on me, if you get the motives right, if you're doing things that you truly care about, the effort always follows. The productivity always follows. You will never half-ass anything you really care about, ever.
Mhm.
And so I think we spend so much time after the fact trying to trick ourselves into staying productive, right? When if we focus on things like, what are my real motives? How do I make sure, whenever possible, the choices I'm making put me in a situation where I am truly motivated? You will be shocked at what you can accomplish. And then the things like getting things done and other stuff become the icing on the cake, right? They will turbocharge that productivity, but there is no shortcut
Mm.
for finding the things that are truly motives. And this sounds like a really terrible plug for a book, but like it, as I say in Dark Horse, like uh, like the first part about the pursuit of fulfillment is discovering what we call micro motives, those things that truly are yours, that animate you. And if you understand them, you'll be shocked at how much control you have of the sort of choices in your life. And if you keep putting yourself in situations that you are motivated, you will look amazing. And I just think we overlook that step in productivity.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay. Hey, one last question. We mentioned your goals a couple of times. You've got the book coming out. I'm sure the book getting that finalized and get it, is a big goal. Is there any other? What's the one other big goal you're working on right now? Is there anything that
Well,
comes?
I've got a bunch of them, but here's let me tell you one that's not going very well. Um,
Okay.
at the start of the pandemic, uh, my buddy, he plays the guitar, he plays in a band. I was like, I play the piano, but I was like, I'd love, it'd be nice to have a portable instrument and I feel like just being brought. So he said, listen, I'm gonna buy you a guitar. He sent me a guitar, and I'm trying. I really am, but for whatever reason, it's not going very well. I mean, I feel like I'm still like I but I'm gonna stick to it because he told me, he said, listen, I'll buy you the guitar, but then as soon as we can get together, you have to come on stage, even if you're
Oh,
terrible, in a little like jam session. So I'm sticking to the goal out of fear. Um, but I'm trying. It's just not. I'm not making as much progress as I feel like I should have.
it's clearly not one of your micro
It's really
motives.
not. It's really not. But I love that he bought me a guitar, and I'm gonna stick with it long enough to not make a fool out of myself in a little local band for one song.
Now, is there a kind of a date in mind for this jam session or?
Well, this is the nice thing about the pandemic. Maybe the one upside is it's kind of like this execution for me that has
Uh,
like been pushed off. So I'm thinking it's going to be 2022.
oh,
So I have a
nice,
little bit of time,
nice.
and I got to get enough chords that I can just get through this. But it's been fun. But it's a little humbling when you realize that you're not really good at everything.
Awesome. Well, geez, you do a lot of other things really well there. So,
That's what I try to
um,
tell myself.
huh. Well, hey man, we talked about a lot. I kept you for an extra almost half an hour here. I appreciate it. Is there anything else we did not talk about that you would like the audience to know?
No, look, I think this has been amazing, and I'm looking forward to the next time in Iowa where drinks are on me.
Awesome, man. Well, gosh, sometimes I get, just with your pedigree, your experiences, your book, sometimes it can be a little intimidating talking to people who've accomplished so much, and you're just so down to earth and just so great personality. I really appreciate everything you shared with us, and I think educational leaders are going to take away a ton from this episode. So I cannot thank you enough. And again, I'm gonna one more time make sure that people check out your books, The End of Average, Dark Horse, and Collective Illusions. Sounds incredible. So Todd, I appreciate it, man. It sounds like you got some movie time coming up, and you've got a scotch waiting for you, correct?
There you go. Exactly.
What's we dabble a little bit in alcohol talk. What's your go-to scotch then?
So right now I'm doing Glenfiddich, 18-year-old single malt, and it's been my go-to for a little while, and it's my family's all from Scotland, so
Okay.
my ancestors and stuff. So I feel like it brings me back to my roots. How
Awesome.
about you? What's your?
Well, oh God, I know nothing about Scotch. So I was kind of, here in Iowa, we've got, the brewery thing has kind of taken, just like
Yeah,
everywhere, breweries are huge. So, I like, I just, we've got one here in Iowa City, one up in, I live like an hour from all the, what I, in here in the Midwest, the major metropolises, the 150,000 population cities.
right, right.
So I just going out there and trying out new things is kind of my thing. And, I'm a big fan of ciders.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I'm kind of excited to kind of get back in the flow of doing that. And, kind of just like you guys out there, it's kind of been shut down a little bit. And I will say in Iowa, things have opened up a little bit more than they have on the coast. So
Yeah, and I'm getting my vaccine next week, so I'm ready to roll now. I'm
nice, nice. Well, I'm just warning you, we've all gotten it here in our district, and that day after has really beaten up a lot of people. After you get that vaccine, the next day, almost everybody's kind of been under the weather. And so I wish you good luck with that.
Thank you.
I struggled for a couple days after it, just warning you. So,
All right, I'm ready then. Okay.
so Todd, thank you so much, man. This has been a lot of fun. Where can our listeners connect with you online? We didn't really talk about social media. Are you on social media?
I
And
am. I try not to be too much on there. I just it's like, but yeah, it's L Todd Rose because my parents named me Larry Todd Rose, but never meant to call me Larry. So like L Todd Rose is my handle.
were you most active on Twitter or Instagram, Facebook, or
Twitter's
not?
the easiest.
Twitter.
Twitter's the
Okay.
easiest. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's actually where I connected with you at. So,
Yep.
Todd, I really appreciate it. This has been a lot of fun, and you've got so much knowledge and such a cool story. Really appreciate everything you're doing for us here in the K through 12 world.
No, thanks. It was really great. I really enjoyed it.
All right, man. Well, hey, have a good weekend, and go Sox this year.
There you go. Thank you.
All right, man. Have a good night.
Take care. See ya.